Esta serie documental presenta la investigación, la experiencia y el ejemplo de vida de hombres y mujeres, activistas de una transformación profunda en la sociedad. Sus mensajes hablan del sentido de la Tierra como sistema integral y señalan un horizonte de conciencia nueva y de mayor sensibilidad. Los invitamos a beber del manantial de sus palabras y así poder escuchar las muy diferentes voces de la Tierra.
Shinoda Bolen es médica psiquiatra y analista junguiana, autora y conferenciante internacionalmente conocida. Es representante permanente ante la Comisión de las Naciones Unidas para la Condición Jurídica y Social de la Mujer. También presenta distintos programas mundiales de activismo hacia la conciencia ambiental, social y de ayuda mutua. En muchas de sus obras describe con profundo análisis el espíritu indomable en todas las mujeres y la potencialidad y el rol de la mujer en la recuperación de la salud de la humanidad y del planeta.
My sense is that, given that I have used that bell in so many places in the world, at sacred sites, at conferences and things like that, that I think that when I sound the bell, that all of that energy from all of those other places come, and we get centered and supported by that energy field. In the process of growing through my own experience, the greatest influences have actually been spiritual. And up in the mountains, sleeping under the stars, getting a sense of how beautiful the stars are, for one thing, because if you live in a big city like Los Angeles, which I did, there's light pollution. You don't see the stars. You see the moon and an occasional star, but you go up into the mountains and there's the Milky Way, and they are just gorgeous. Okay, so first of all, I'm affected by how beautiful the universe is, and one particular night that did influence the whole rest of my life. So I was looking really closely for one of those shooting stars, which meant that I was really attending to it. Not just that it was pretty, but I was really looking at it. And somehow there was a change in consciousness. I went from looking at it out there to suddenly it was like, woof, I'm part of this whole beautiful universe. And I didn't have words for it, but it really moved me. I knew something that I didn't know before. Now, since then, language has certainly provided a lot of ways of describing it. So in the Greek language, it's gnosis and logos. When you know something with your mind and you can replicate it and prove it, it's logos. But when you know something in your heart, when you know something in your bones, when you intuitively grasp the meaning of it, and there aren't words for it, that's gnosis. I knew that I was part of this beautiful universe from that point on. At some level, it has made a huge difference. The other spiritual experience that really changed my life, I contrasted my own experience with that of a disabled brother who was disabled since birth and terribly disabled, mentally and physically. It really occurred to me there strongly that it could have been me. He could have been me. I could have been him. And here I was, all full of myself, thinking I'd accomplished everything that I accomplished, and I realized it was all grace. It was all luck. It was all good fortune. And so I felt extraordinarily grateful and humbled. And my prayer had to do with, how can I say thank you? I've been so proud, and now I'm so grateful. How do I say thank you? And it came to me what I should do with my life, which was to be a doctor to help people. So that's how I ended up in psychiatry. Now, the first book I wrote was on synchronicity, called The Tao of Psychology. And there's so much synchronicity in who I was given as supervisors in my residency, and how it was that this was the only residency in the entire country that had some Jungian supervisors. I was not supposed to be invested in what was happening with my patients. I should have a kind of therapeutic distance. I mean, there is a therapeutic distance, but not in the way I was taught. It has to do with being able to empathically feel what this other person has gone through, and at the same time have a real understanding about what contributes to what happened to the person, and also not just to focus on what their difficulties and complexes and problems are, what their anxieties are all about, but also to find out what gives them joy and what are their natural talents. And I think people were meant to bloom into who they were meant to be. The Jungian perspective was large enough to encompass the spiritual, the creativity, the sense of anything that I studied, and I didn't have to compartmentalize. It was large enough because it brought in the fields of spirituality and creativity and philosophy and a lot of things. And so when you add the field of psychic phenomena, parapsychology, and the research at Stanford Research Institute and all about things like psychokinesis, the ability to move things with your mind, or telepathy, or precognition, or all these things that are considered kind of woo-woo, like weird or not scientific. If you can't replicate it, then it's not real. Where if you grow into a field where you feel the truth of what a person is saying and tells you of his or her experience, and that you feel it here, there's a truth detector, there's a kind of knowingness that does not require a whole bunch of scientific replication. And besides, so much of what is amazingly parapsychology, psychic, has to do with it being so significant for the person who's experienced it. That brings in that whole other field. So essentially what I'm saying is that there's this field of energy and this field of connectedness between the parapsychological world, where people can connect with that knowledge, and the knowledge from the heart space, or what Rupert Sheldrake spoke about in theoretical biology. When human beings learn something as a species, it enters the collective unconscious of the species. Now there's enough research on this to be convincing. All of my written work has so much to do with seeing psychology, seeing all kinds of ways that each of us are influenced by the archetypes inside of us, and the collective unconscious that connects us with everybody else, and our particular family, and the forces of history and the forces of spirituality and religion and all of that. So we come into the world with certain possibilities, and the world acts on us. They all kind of come together in me, a quality of spiritually based activism, a real energetic sense of the need for feminism, women and men as equals, which are different archetypes and patriarchal archetypes. No Zeus at the top, no just one God, but a spiritual field that is masculine and feminine, and where there is a strong egalitarian, of course, and a connection with other species, with the planet. I think human beings in general come into the world with all kinds of potential, and all kinds of talents. But some people have real strong talents, say in music and art. When you have a talent, like an athletic talent, and you are allowed to use it and develop it, you take it and you go with it because you can do it so well and because it gives you joy to develop that which you are. Archetypes are the same thing, that all of the archetypes are potentially present in us all, but some of them from the very beginning are stronger than others. You can see it in the newborn nursery. You have a whole bunch of little girls, say, in their newborn nursery, and there's some just sort of little feminine, smiley ones, and there's some passive ones, and there's some who are not. It's a different energy pattern. Each of us come into the world with certain talents, certain energy talents, certain natural abilities. Now, if you live in a culture that says a little girl has to behave like this, so cut off that behavior, which is, say, Athena or Artemis, because those are archetypes that, don't make you very marriageable. You develop your Aphrodite, but don't let her misbehave. Think about Hera. Be a nice Persephone and just be charming and adapt to everybody. And same as on and then there's the male archetype, or there's a male side in every woman, as there's a feminine side in every man. And sometimes that feminine, the male side in a woman resembles a certain quality of archetype in a male. So you can have, for example, a masculine side in a woman that behaves very much like a Zeus. But that's sort of uncommon. But when it's there, and you have a bossy little girl at 4 or 5, and boy, she thinks she's going to be a CEO in a world where she actually can be now. But think of how it must be for her in a country or actually at the turn of the mid-20th century. This was not good behavior. You're not going to be marriageable. So you're punished, you feel badly for who you are. So what is happening now in the culture is that the sides of women that can be smart and strategic or competitive are no longer stifled. And one of the interesting things about the archetype of Artemis, which is the archetype of the feminist, is that she has a sense of sisterhood, but she also has a sense of being equal with her brothers. She just doesn't have the sense of power over. And this is the archetype that is moving into the culture now. When you have an archetype like Artemis, you're comfortable in the presence of men who don't try to dominate you. You're quite comfortable with men. You often have men as colleagues and allies and all of that. But you have an innate sense of sisterhood often, and you really also want to go in the direction that something in yourself wants you to follow. Because she was the goddess of the wilderness, which is, metaphorically, she may be a girl who loves nature and is by nature then an environmentalist. She's out there saving the animals, she's out there saving the trees, she's out there saving the mountains. This is her terrain. That's one of the archetypal parts of her. So there are these 3 archetypes that were on the female side, which are called the virgin goddesses, and they have a quality that the relationship goddesses don't have. That is, they have the quality of being one unto themselves. Whatever they're doing is important, but not all that important. they can go it alone and not need another person to fulfill them and make them whole. Those archetypes are now allowable much more in the culture than they ever used to be. Before, if you weren't married and had kids, forget it. You didn't have a place in society. That if you have a natural talent for athletics or music or art or intellect or something like that, to be able to develop it and become able to express the gift that was naturally yours, then there's a sense of living with integrity and with depth. The same as with the archetypes. If you can live out an archetype that is what you came into the world as, it fits you to live a life that fits that archetype. And only in a society which allows, or a family that allows, a range of being who you are, is that possible. It's getting easier for many men in this culture, but it's still harder to not fit the form of masculinity. And the thing of it is that when you don't develop another side of yourself, it doesn't get developed. So women can develop their competitive attributes that have to do with the masculine side of themselves. Little boys, men, are not yet comfortable developing feminine attributes of compassion, of emotionality, of expressiveness, actually. It all depends on the influences of the family and society and culture around you, whether you can develop certain sides of yourself or not. And it begins with the family, where a little boy does not behave like that, or a little girl can't plan on doing that. I mean, if you start to feel that something that is natural to you is bad, then you can't develop it. Now, if you identify with an archetype, that's a problem too, because then you become a caricature of an archetype, and it's like that's all you are. And it's very limiting. But if you think of yourself and everybody else as essentially having a persona, and that was named after the mask that the Greek actors wore on stage. So if you put on a mask, they knew who you were supposed to be. Now, if you identify with the mask, and that is all you are, then there isn't any depth behind it. You are living out a identity because the mask is so acceptable. So that's the persona. You need to know that a persona is like clothes in your closet, that you have to learn as you grow older what is appropriate to wear into what situation. And one of the metaphors I've used in my books about goddesses in every woman and gods in every man is you need a well-functioning ego chairing the committee that has sitting around the committee your particular strong archetypes, your inner child, your parents, the society figures that require you to behave in a certain way, and you sit with the ego being aware, for example, of when you are identifying with what your father said, which is in Jungian terms identifying with the animus. And so suddenly the it takes over the ego, and you are making these patriarchal judgments, but you're not making them anymore. It's that you have been taken over by that one, or the child that is petulant or something, or one of what about Aphrodite? If you have a discerning ego, Aphrodite needs you to look out for your capacity to be fascinated with somebody and draw them out, and they think you're perfectly charming. It is a sense that there is something beyond ego, beyond the archetypes, that gives meaning to the entire life you have when you are in touch with it. And then it is you have a sense of connection with something that exists invisibly so, but makes you aware that you have a purpose to this life, and it has a spiritual element to it. So Aphrodite, for example, if she behaved if a youngish woman or any woman behaved like pure Aphrodite, she would be seductive, or she would be, depending on her situation, she would be considered easy sexual object. She'd be personally ruined by the situation. When you do something from the archetypal depths, it could be surgery if you were really good at doing that. It could be music. It could be gardening, but you lose track of time. It could be music, but in the music, when you're doing it, you're not paying attention to the notes. You're there, you're in it, you're being it. And this is what it's like when you are in an archetypal space with the archetype of the self as well. That there is a sense that it is joyful. It may be really, really hard, but you don't care. You're growing, you're doing, you're being yourself. You come into the world with some sense of you came here for some kind of purpose, to be who you really are. And are you going to be able to do that? Can you live out the talent that you came innately with? And then there is a sense of being in touch with the self. As I see the earth and the planet and everybody in it, and in a really potential time when we could destroy our climate. It seems to be on the way to doing that, or the nuclear warheads are now proliferating again. I'm also aware that there's this other quiet movement that's going on, and it will be through women to bring about equality. And when women bring about equality, men will be freer to be themselves than they've ever been before. They just don't recognize how much, when women can be who we can be, they can be who they can be too. Well, first of all, I think that if we are going to save our planet, which is Mother Earth, I do think it's going to be primarily women and women's consciousness that can do it. And it begins, looking at one of the problems being overpopulation. And as soon as you start to give women the choice of bearing children or not, you'll bring children into the world that are wanted. And there will be fewer of them in a planet that needs fewer and needs more kids coming into the world that are not disturbed by poverty, abuse, misery, but can grow into splendid people. The sense of consciousness growing through women to change the world in a way that I also believe is possible, because I think that there's something that the theoretical biologists have taught us about morphogenesis and morphic field, and at a certain tipping point, things can actually shift. That's what makes me a believer in activism, in a sense that there is an under the radar activism going on. And for me, it's through women's circles with a spiritual center. So there's a tapping into the spiritual largest self, connecting us all to divinity within us all, within the planet, with everything. And you cannot do therapy one-on-one with all the people that need therapy. But it's possible to be in circles with people that you stay with and are honest with, and you learn to trust, and each person helps the others in it to develop the dream they have of who they could be. If you sit around a sacred center and are soul friends, then each listens truly at a soul level, heart level to the other person. So you get mirrored back, you get compassion. There's a circle with compassion. Then there is a sense of going into silence. This is sacred space. It means that you treat each other as if you each matter. And for example, there's a integrity that develops within that group, and it's like any really good therapy is held in a temenos. Any relationship in which you're soul friends, anamkara friends, or heart-connected friends, there's a sanctuary space between the two of you. It is a safe place for you to talk about what's on your heart. And women have a more natural talent for it, because we, as friendships between women, often have to do with sharing what's vulnerable and sharing it in an egalitarian way. So, otherwise it's therapy. If I just listen to you telling me all your problems and I never tell you mine, then it's an unofficial therapy. But if we're going to be friends, you tell me something that you feel vulnerable about, and it hangs there until there's something of a reciprocity. And there's a shared sense of going deeper together. And that's what a good circle will do. And it becomes a place where ideas can be incubated and held. Men don't do friendships like women do. When I was getting to women become friends by sharing their vulnerabilities. Men do not want to share their vulnerabilities because it puts someone down. When they have true friends, they can share that. And when they can be in a circle where it's safe to do that, they can do that. And that develops a whole side of compassion rather than what they grew up with. This is how the collective unconscious or the morphic field actually changes. It isn't by twisting your arm or forcing you to believe something. It's that it becomes a new belief system in the species.
Distintas voces, matices, percepciones sobre una misma indagación. La complejidad de la vida, la enorme velocidad de los procesos humanos, la vitalidad creativa, el entendimiento abriéndose a múltiples dimensiones, la trama misteriosa de corazones que laten al pulso de la Tierra.
I started working in parapsychology at one of the biggest think tanks in the world. And it was the first research that was ever funded to explore the ecology of consciousness. I'd been meditating for years before that. And I knew what meditation was about. And it was time not to listen to a teacher, but just to go into silence. And the gift was seeing the aliveness in the universe. That was it. It's what you're looking, it's that we are living in a living universe. And it wasn't simply to see that, it was to experience that deep, deep within.
Holding on to power, bigger nuclear weapons, more billionaires, all that is these imperfect human beings who happen to have access to power over. That's patriarchy. As if to be a billionaire now makes you happy. Well, it seems to me the billionaires in this country are not very happy. But neither are the people on the bottom who don't have enough basic money to do ordinary life. So something is wrong here, for sure. Well, there's patriarchy, which is hierarchy, and there's circle, which is equal. Those are the two kinds of energies. And when it's a hierarchy based on power over. But when you enter a field where you are doing work to help people and you are aware you don't know everything, and you are trusting that in the energy field between the two of you, good things will happen if the chemistry or alchemy is there, and that you will be affected as they are affected. And so it's not hierarchical. And it's basically circle. You got it, it's circle. People who work with dysfunctional families introduce the idea of codependent and narcissist. So every couple is either in a circle or in a hierarchy. If a couple is in a hierarchy, one of them, and these days it could be a woman, always used to be a man, but now it could just as well be a woman, who is the power half. And that's the narcissist. And then the codependent is the one that goes along with. A dysfunctional relationship, by definition, it involves codependency and narcissism. Usually it's only the codependent that can change it. And by changing her behavior. But it requires the person who observes more and knows more and about behavior to speak up. But that's not something available to, what, about 60% of the world's women or more? The personal sense of having a heart that takes in people and experiences and feels with them. And then there's a sense of it in turn might be able to tap into a larger field of the heart, like an ocean of human heartfelt energy. I think it either has to do with service and creativity, or both. That helping other people in whatever way. It can be very abstract. It can be but you have a awareness that what you are doing, and it may be all by yourself in some kind of laboratory thing, but you know that this information that you are working out is going to help humanity in some way. So that service to others, not just human others, to animal others, to the environmental others. I mean, what is your calling? This is the basic thing. What is your calling? What are you here for? How can you help? Especially at this time when we can, this is a gorgeous planet. We are ruining it. And we only have maybe 4 or 5 more decades to make it work really for everybody and everything on it, or do it in. When you see the Earth from outer space and that rim of atmosphere around it, and know that it is getting so contaminated, this is like the experience of the fetus in the womb having a contaminated placenta, because maybe we don't have the cord anymore, but the atmosphere, the trees, we breathe out carbon dioxide, the trees take it in and breathe out oxygen. We take the oxygen, we are in continual connection with the environment. This whole notion of the destruction of all the trees in this world, and thinking that we can do that, and all of the and then the water supply that we're contaminating, and all of this stuff, everything that we need for life on this planet, it is being contaminated by human beings. But do I think we're in a period of transformation as a human race? I think we are right here where we are either going to self-destruct or we'll have an opportunity to evolve. I mean, it's either destruction or evolution. Is our voice heard? Does what we care about, will others help us? And for example, the women's movement, women, their children, their boys, a lot of those boys are egalitarian. And, now there's another generation after that. And then we're down to the millennials and the post-millennials, and they seem to have a right attitude about, listen, get rid of those guns. The guys at the top said, no, what are those millennials doing? They have been raised with feminism somewhere in the air. and the issues that such as gun control, the issues such as equal rights for all people, the right to have control over your own body, which is a women's issue. All of those things are becoming part of what most caring, intelligent people are beginning to feel as we can see it in our high schools and colleges now. So things are changing. At the same time, we can obviously see that things are getting pretty awful too. It has something to do with how well do we listen to, say, our children. Do we, as parents, think we know best, or do we have a real conversation with a child who is speaking from his or her heart about something, and we are aware that there's a bigger world and there are certain things that one must adjust to, but what we do, if we don't just impose ourselves on a child, is we take what that child is saying and trying to find a way for that child to be and care about what matters innately to him or to her. And I do think there is something about having an intention and making a connection with what really matters And then, in a sense, the universe moves too. Who should tell you who you should love? I mean, love is something that happens. And it is a small miracle when it happens. That it's a wonderful energy. And there's a sense of heart-soul connection when it's really not about possession or lust or prestige or persona. It's about soul, body, mind connection. Love is the only energy that the more you give away, the more the other person has, the more you have, and the more there is. Everything else is zero-sum. So if we really operate our activism, our lives out of what it is and who it is that we love, it's a different kind of energy. And it's motivated by love of wanting to make something beautiful if it's creativity, to have a message if it's activism, to use your abilities, etc. So, that's an assignment. So you're fulfilling an assignment. It's good work.
Algunos seres humanos comienzan a sentir la necesidad biológica de estar en armonía con los demás seres vivos y de ayudar a que la inteligencia de la Tierra emerja en cada vez más individuos, de modo que juntos podamos percibir el maravilloso diseño que somos en un todo y parte de la Tierra